Hey folks, Ted Boss here from Shoulder Season Counseling. I'm a licensed therapist in Idaho and Utah, and I do parent coaching with families all over. So today I'm going to talk to you about two things that kids need that are foundational to their development and help them cultivate their identity. And a lot of times when kids have a strong identity, there's a ripple effect of positive things that happen throughout their life. Okay, so the two things are a sense of competency and what's called the living model. I'm going to break down each of these and kind of give you a little bit of developmental psychology behind why they're so important. Sense of competency, yeah, that makes sense. I think we would all agree with that that's important for kids to have. Parents will oftentimes say, oh, well, my kid's good at this, and my kid's good at that, and my kid's good at this. So, yeah, they have a sense of competency. But that's not really for the parents necessarily to decide. If your kid doesn't feel like they're good at those things, then it wouldn't be considered a sense of competency. And so they wouldn't necessarily glean the values of feeling that way, feeling competent. If a kid's on a sports team because the parents, are really, really hung up on the sports team, it might be more of a drag than a feeling of competency. We talk about a sense of competency. This is something that the kid has to value. The reason why the sense of competency is so important is because kids around the age of 9, 10, 11, 12, their developmental stage is industry versus inferiority. And so a sense of competency is a way for them to concretely exercise a sense of industry, a sense of control, and demonstrate that they can, be a productive and valuable person. When they get older, we'll talk about we talk about intrinsic value and internal locus of control and all that. But it's okay for a kid to kind of have a little bit of an external locus of control when they're younger because they're growing up and they're trying to figure life out. Now, the sense of competency really can be anything, right? It can be Legos, it can be fishing, it can be, whatever, as long as like kids feel like, they're genuinely good at it. You don't necessarily have to explicitly wake up in the morning and look at the mirror and say, I'm good at Legos. I think if they are good at something and they genuinely feel like they are good at it, they can still kind of glean the benefits. So one other piece to consider about sense of competency is that young kids become teenagers. This gets a little more complicated, right? Because teenagers might find themselves being competent at something that's not necessarily what you would consider a good thing. Might even brag that they're good at this thing, whatever it may be. I've worked with all kinds of kids who were good at all kinds of things that they probably shouldn't have been good at. I would argue that you have to be careful about what you take seriously with teenagers when it comes to the sense of competency, because sometimes I think deep down they know they might be doing something that's really they shouldn't be doing. And sometimes I might even challenge a teenager a little bit, be like, hey, listen, I know that's actually not necessarily good stuff that you're doing there. So I'm not gonna sit here and argue with you about it. And and then I'll kind of change the subject or redirect the conversation. Sometimes with teenagers, if you keep kind of pushing on it and saying, no, what you're doing isn't good and it's not good for you, sometimes it just makes them do it even more. So planned ignoring is the kind of strategy there. Obviously there's times when you have to intervene. I can't get in the nuances on this quick video about that, but those are just some things to consider around sense of competency. Okay, so the second thing is the living model, right? We have to keep in mind that when we say the living model, we mean role model, but we mean way more than just role model. Kids don't understand the nuances and the ramifications of, foreign policy, politics or whatever, and that's okay because kids aren't really supposed to be worried about that stuff. They're supposed to be worried about, don't punch my little sister, look both ways when I cross the road, sharing is nice, and recognizing when someone is sad might be beneficial throughout my life when I see a sad expression on their face. That's what kids need to focus on. The living model is someone who will role model abstract emotions, right? You can talk to a kid about what integrity is or about what compassion or empathy is or pride or a sense of competency for that matter. But when they really experience that, when they actually experience a sense of competency, or they experience a moment of integrity, or they experience a moment of compassion, that's when it really kind of hits home for kids. That's when it really makes sense. And a lot of adults were the same way, right? So the living model is so important because emotions are abstract, right? They're not, you can't touch them. Conceptualizing them can be difficult, right? But having someone to role model these abstract things that we experience is so important for kids. Maybe it's a moment that you name explicitly with a kid and say, oh wow, that was a moment of integrity. Or maybe you just kind of let it rest, right? You don't necessarily need to point it out every time and make a big deal about how positive and great everything is, right? Just let the experience be itself, and let the kid have the experience. Folks, I hope this is helpful. You can go to shoulderseasoncounseling.com and reach out if you have any questions. If you like the video, hit like and subscribe. Maybe share it with somebody if you think it would be helpful. Take care.